Welcome to section 2.1, segment bisectors. So the midpoint of a line segment. The midpoint of a line segment is the point on the segment that divides the segment into two congruent parts. Okay. When we divide something in half, we call it bisect. So bisecting means to cut in half. So this should actually say segment AM is congruent to segment MB. And when we talk about the lengths, we just say AM is equal to MB. When we talk about the segments, we can say that they are congruent. So for example, P is the midpoint of segment RS. So RP is 7, which means that the other half, PS, is also 7. And then they also want to know the length of RS. So RS is going to be 7 plus 7. So we add the two halves together to get a total of 14. So over here, N is the midpoint of segment MP. So if this half is 11, then the other half, NP, is 11. And then they want to know how long MP is. So MP is the length of the whole segment. So 11 plus 11 is 22. In example 3, they give us the length of the whole segment AB, and we want to know how long each half is. So since M is the midpoint, it cuts segment AB in half. So 26 divided by 2 means that each half is 13. So AM is 13 and MB is 13. Okay, so same thing over here. The whole length of the segment DF is 18. So if we take half of that, each half is equal. So DE and EF are both 9. So a segment bisector is a segment, ray, line, or plane that intersects a segment at its midpoint. So if you look over in this picture, we have line CD is a bisector of segment AB. So it cuts segment AB in half, so that then we call it a segment bisector. So again, to bisect a segment means to divide the segment into two congruent segments. Or basically we can just say cut it in half. So over here, AM is congruent to MB. The two halves are congruent because line CD bisected segment AB. So here we have line L is a segment bisector. You never want to assume based on looks. You always want to either be told that it's a segment bisector, or these tick marks will show you that the two halves are congruent. But if it just looks like it and nothing is marked, or they didn't tell you it's a segment bisector, then we can't assume that. And that goes for anything in geometry. So here, oops. So this half PN is 15, so the other half MP is also 15. And they also want us to find the length of the whole segment MN, which will be 15 plus 15, which is 30. Okay. Over here, line L is a segment bisector. We can also see that because the two halves are marked congruent. We want to solve for x. So if this half MB is 35, we know that this half is also 35. So we know that 5x is or equals 35. So then divide both sides by 5 and we get x equals 7. Okay. The last part of today's lesson is midpoints. So the coordinates of the midpoint of a line segment is the average of the coordinates of its endpoints. So if you're finding the middle of something, you're going to add it together and divide by 2. So here we want the middle of point of segment AB. So we're going to add the x values together, x1 and x2, and divide by 2, and that will give me the x coordinate of the midpoint. And then we're going to add the y values together, y1 and y2, and divide by 2, and that will give me the y value of the midpoint. So again, we're going to add the x values together, divide by 2, add the y values together, divide by 2. So let's do that for this example. So the coordinate of my midpoint, we're going to add the x values together, so 1 plus 7, and divide that by 2, and we'll add the y values together, 2 plus 4, and divide that by 2. So we get 8 divided by 2, which is 4, and then we get 4 plus 2 is 6, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. So my midpoint is at 4, 3. So over here, same thing. Let's add our x values together. Negative 2 plus 6 divided by 2. And then we have 3 plus negative 1. We're adding our y values together and dividing by 2. So negative 2 plus 6 is 4. And 3 plus a negative 1 is really 3 minus 1, so that's 2 divided by 2. So 4 divided by 2 gives us an x value of 2, and 2 divided by 2 gives us a y value of 1. So we're going to graph these points just to prove that this m value is actually the midpoint. So A is at 1, 2, x comes first, y comes second, so to the right 1, up 2. B is at 7, 4, so to the right 7, up 4. So that's B, this is A. And then M we found was at 4, 3. So to the right 4, up 3. So you can see that M actually is the midpoint of A and B. And we'll do the same thing on this example. So A is at negative 2, 3. So to the left 2, up 3. B is at 6, negative 1. So to the right 6, down 1. And we found M. M was at 2, 1. So to the right 2, up 1. And you can tell that that is actually the midpoint in the middle of points A and B.